Right, a formal good morning, good afternoon and good evening to everyone who's joined us. Really delighted to see such a huge spread of geographies as I'm seeing it in the chat, and we'd really encourage you to use the chat amply through the next hour or so that we have together. This is very much a live session and your opportunity to interact with myself and also Shironica, whom it's my great pleasure to introduce today. We've got Professor Shironica Karunanayaka from the Open University of Sri Lanka, who kindly agreed to co-create some additional content to go with the core content that was first released last September in the Digital Literacy Lab for educators. And of course, as you've all been joining us in this second iteration, it's a huge pleasure to meet some of you virtually. My name's Dr. Emma Paulsport, as you will have seen across the course, and you will have heard my voice and seen me virtually already in other forms. But of course, today's focus is really to take a case study of some of the challenges and indeed opportunities, as we're going to come to, of our digital world. So I'm going to set off now. And as I just start setting up our presentation for the day, just to remind everybody that this session is going to be recorded and will be available for you to rewatch and revisit after this session. And those of you who are watching this asynchronously, huge welcome to this session asynchronously as well. And the way in which this is going to work today, so we've got our discussion to and fro. Shironica and I are really looking to put this case study of cyberbullying in Sri Lanka, a cautionary tale of hope, into context, and also particularly into your context. So we'd really encourage you from the outset to start thinking about parallel scenarios in your geographies, and most importantly, how we can communicate the learning points out of these scenarios. At the end of this session, we're going to point you to a forum space where we'd encourage you to keep exchanging ideas and reflections with other course participants on this topic. And in that forum post, you'll also find a poll which will encourage you to think about cyberbullying. So without further ado, that is what I'd love to start out with. So our setting the scene for this session today is this poll. To what extent do you think that digital technologies, including the internet, have made it easier for people to bully others? Oh, here we go. And at this point, I'm going to launch the poll and invite you to share your thoughts. Oh my goodness, live responses. Excellent. We've got a huge turnout so far. I'll give a few more moments for people to respond and reflect on this. So what are we reflecting on? To what extent do you think that digital technologies, including the internet, have made it easier for people to bully others? Very, interesting responses so far. A few more moments we've got a few more people who might like to vote on this. An interesting one. I can see you've got some Q&A. Lovely. I can see some people also popping some ideas, which is excellent. And we're going to expand on this in a second in the Q&A. Okay. Oh, we've still got a few more people. Lovely. Okay. I think at this point, I'll close the poll, but encourage you to keep this question in mind. So what is the question here? I'm going to share the results so you can see. Now, are these sharing? Kirk, can you kindly signal if everyone can see the poll results?
They should be able to.
Okay.
If you've hit share, it should be visible to everyone.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Kirk. For anyone who can't see, so what we've got here, interesting summary here. So we've got 49% of you have said that they strongly agree, 50% agree, and we've got someone who's not quite so sure. So the idea of this question is to really get us thinking about how the digital world has changed how we interact with one another and has changed social phenomena, because of course bullying has always been an issue offline, but what the question we're asking ourselves, especially at these opening moments of the course, is to what extent digital technologies, including the internet, have facilitated and made this easier. So in this vein, this is something that Shironica and I are really looking to discuss, is this question of bullying offline versus online. And here, with Shironica, perhaps I can gesture to you. We started thinking about this question of what it means for the person bullying. So that's, let's think about the context of the course. This is so-called digital creations. This is what does it mean to have access to huge numbers of people online, and very quickly if you're looking to inflict harm on others online. And what happens for the recipient of those messages, the digital consumer in the context of our course? What does this mean for receiving such messages? So we'd encourage you to share your ideas really at this point in the chat, and we'd love to hear what you think, given the context, given what you've learned so far in the course about how new media have come about as a result of digital technologies. What does it mean? How is bullying facilitated, or how has it changed? Shironica, some thoughts over to you as we start to set the scene for our Sri Lanka case study. What, in the Sri Lankan context, what does it mean to have access to different social media platforms, etc., in your view?
Okay, thank you, Emma. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to join this live session. And hello, everyone. I'm happy to see such an active audience here. You have been putting a lot of thoughts already in the chat, even before we asked to. It's very good to see that you have started thinking actively about this issue of cyberbullying. Okay, so as the polling, the results showed, it's like almost 99% of you either strongly agree or agreed that digital technologies played a big role in like increasing this issue. So it's a global issue. So we all now, we are depending on online interactions. Online interactions, mainly social media, plays a very big role all over the world. So in Sri Lanka, it's the same as well, because especially during this time when we are like during the pandemic, we are mostly homebound and or lockdown. Even now, we are facing a lot of difficulties in traveling, and so people need to connect with each other, interact with each other. So the digital technologies have become like essential need nowadays, especially. But at the same time, it creates a lot of risks as well. The statistics indicate online harassments have drastically increased during this pandemic period. So I think globally it's the same scenario. In Sri Lanka also, the statistics shows the cyber harassments through social media as the highest number of incidents reported. I mean, there may be a lot unreported as well, but a lot majority reported are harassments done through social media. So, so that's why we thought about asking you. Already you have, I mean, the question. Okay, the bullies and being bullied. So shall we just go through some of the thoughts that's shared in the chat, Emma, so that we can pick up some thoughts?
Yeah,
I think some interesting ideas are there.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Kirk. I should have gestured to my colleagues, Kirk Paris, Dr. Kirk Paris, who's joining us from Vancouver early in the morning over in Canada, and Dr. Alex Grech. Thank you, Kirk. Thank you for joining, and apologies for not gesturing. And Dr. Alex Grech of the 3CL Foundation over in Malta, who are kindly activating some of our conversations as well, and pointing us to some solutions, how we can work towards solutions and whose role it is to solve some of these issues. So some interesting comments. This idea of anonymity, which is an interesting one that Shironica, you and I were you were discussing, weren't we, about this idea that yes, you can send a letter anonymously, you can, but before digital technologies, this was possible, but somehow it's the speed and the access that really has accelerated this anonymity, of course, of this idea of having aliases online, other names, hiding behind different identities. And I suppose here what we're seeing is that cyberbullying actually then takes us into the realm of trust online as well. Who do we trust? How do we trust who we're connecting with if we've never met some of these individuals in person? Some really important comments about education, our role as educators to educate people about this question. Some points here also about inadequacy, the impact on those who receive some of these, who might be on the receiving end of messages. Interesting, we've got terms, cyberbullies usually referred to as keyboard warriors, hiding behind the keyboard.
And being anonymous, I think that's another thing. You can just bully others without revealing yourself. Like usually in physical bullying, you do that. Offline bullying, you know who is bullying, but online it's anonymous. So easily you can do whatever you want and get away with it as well. So I think that also came as one idea, as being anonymously posting messages, threatening, or just ridiculing people, embarrassing people. It can be of different ways. So I think it's good to think about different forms or different ways of cyberbullying as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And meanwhile, we've got, I think what we're unearthing in the chat here is the richer context of this as to where responsibility lies. So some interesting comments about the role of social media platforms, of course. So this is very topical, isn't it, across the world at the minute, is who moderates content and when is it the role of a social media platform to remove harmful or hateful content, if we're thinking about a spectrum of who it's targeting, from the individual to a group, for example, a particular group. So a very let's say rich and many ideas that we have to pull in, I suppose, when we're thinking about this. So I think at this point, what we've really identified, it's a huge problem, and it's got sort of tentacular reaches into so many issues that we could think about at length. But we've been thinking a little bit more about the Sri Lanka context, and here, hand back over to you, Shironica. The context in Sri Lanka, and of course, at the moment, we'd be thinking very generally about the possible access to huge numbers of people online, the possible instances of cyberbullying. But in the Sri Lanka context, how has this been particularly a worrying context, given children's coming online and their access to digital technologies?
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, it's a real issue, especially at this time, because usually, I mean, children were not allowed in our cultural context, like use of mobile phones or using the internet, social media. Such things were not allowed some time back. You are not allowed to. The children were not allowed to take mobiles to the schools, or even at home, parents would not allow young kids to use mobiles or use internet. So there were certain restrictions, but with the pandemic, it totally changed, because everybody was like compelled to, because of the education. The most important thing for everybody at that moment was to keep the teaching learning process continue. So education is the most important thing for any parent. So those restrictions were no longer valid, because you have to give devices for children, and as well as the internet connectivity, because all teaching learning transactions suddenly went online. So that was needed. I mean, I'm not saying that's a negative, that's a positive thing. We had to do that. But then at the same time, these children are quite vulnerable, especially the teenagers, adolescents. So and they are very quick to use the technology, because they get fascinated by it, and they try out different things. Maybe for fun they do things, and when they're at home, when you can't go to school, the schools were closed, and a lot of restrictions were there for traveling and everything. So then the only connectivity, the connections, we need social connections, social interactions, especially kids need that, the teenagers need that. So this online facility that became available gave them a good opportunity to socialize virtually. So but that at the same time, while it was addressing those needs, like teaching learning to happen, and socializing, interacting with each other, and finding out information from the internet, and that while all those things happening, this cyber harassments also increased, because I think mainly because the sudden transition, because of sudden transition, the awareness about how to use these digital platforms in a safe manner, or in a more responsible manner, I mean, both ways. And even parents are also, they're also working most of the time. Now we are working from home, so everybody actually, we've been discussing with parents and teachers at home. Now everybody was working using devices with the internet connection. So in different rooms people are working, so parents are unable to monitor as well. Now they when they buy the device and give the connectivity and expect the children to study, but sometimes they are because of their work stress and time management, and with all these complexities with this pandemic, sometimes the monitoring or guiding the children, that also doesn't happen. Even though I'm talking about our context, I think it's common everywhere. So that creates this risky situation or the vulnerable situation, especially for kids and teenagers. So we hear a lot of reports, but we don't hear some reports as well. Now, this can result in a lot of very unfortunate situations, because when they get into this sort of unexpected bullying online, there are a lot of psychological effects, like getting extremely embarrassed or scared, fear, or sometimes very depressed. So a lot of effects are there. So this case study where we are going to discuss with you today is about such an incident, but at the same time, how those victims manage to face it, and uh, how they responded positively to that incident. That's what we are going to discuss about this digital in the digital world. This happens. We are unable to stop it, but how to face it and uh, how to be how to be safe and how to be aware about these things. I think most of the comments are see the responsibility of educators. Yes, I think that's crucial. We are all trying to do that, and responsibility of parents as well. So that's where this digital literacy comes in. I think this whole course, the focus of the course is on digital literacy. So I think digital literacy is not just being able to use a device. The definition sometimes is if you know how to use a device, that's digital literacy, but that's not. But how to use a device more meaningfully, in a safe manner and in a responsible manner, all those things comes in digital literacy, as I believe. Okay, I think Emma, we can move
Thank you.
on.
Yeah, no, thank you,
Or if
Sharon.
you want, yeah, okay.
Yep, no, just to pick up a few threads, if I may, 'cause I think what you've really highlighted is that it's a very complicated area that's really been a sort of grim spotlight's been shone on the complexity of this, that we've got digital devices that we've shared to try and keep the business of education going. But if you don't understand how to navigate some of the communication on that or monitor it, it's one thing monitoring discussions in a classroom, isn't it? But then not having access to messaging apps, etc. So thank you. No, it's really, really important context. And I suppose that was another part of, I mean, of course, we're today in the case study, we're focusing on young ladies who've very valiantly coped with this challenge of negative commentary online. But just to give sort of further context, Shironica, some of the other sort of broader social debates, so you were just highlighting the debate about parental responsibility, and also the debate on how digital technologies have really highlighted some of the action taken against women and gender-based violence. Perhaps before we move on to some definitions in the case study itself, I wonder if you could expand a little bit on, or any sort of thoughts on this aspect of what's being seen in the Sri Lanka context.
Okay, so women now, like children and youth, women are also most vulnerable, because most of the time, even not online, even offline as well, people tend to sort of criticize the way you dress, or probably the way you walk or talk or dress. Sometimes, people make embarrassing remarks. Such things happen even in the society for women. And online, this can happen even more quickly, and because especially when you are using social media, innocently you post you post pictures of yourself because you like to share them with. The purpose is very innocent, because the purpose is to share those pictures with your friends, right? In Facebook, you have friends. So you want to share certain, okay, where you have gone, or where certain incidents in your life you like to share with your friends. That's a social need. So it's a social media. But then this same thing becomes targeted to ridicule women, like making very bad comments, maybe about the dresses or their bodies, or it can be anything. But then this is why now they are doing certain studies as well, that they're calling it has become a new form of gender-based violence. Now, gender-based violence is in different forms, but this has become a novel form of gender-based violence, attacking women online with this cyberbullying. So the case study is also one example of that, because the attack is on two young women.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you. And I think what you highlight there, Shironica, is this idea that on the one hand, the great opportunity is that we have all these new ways of expressing ourselves online and sharing our, immediately what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. But then I suppose what we're quickly coming to in the case study is this idea that is being ready for what happens, what's the outcome of when you're sharing, especially to platforms that might give access to your comments and photos to people you don't know. So it's one thing sharing with people you do know, it's another thing sharing with people you don't know, and being ready and knowing how to navigate that. So we've done a very sort of rich, wide-ranging context, and next we were thinking about some of the definitions, because we've been talking about this thing called cyberbullying, and perhaps Shironica, I can hand back over to you to expand a bit on, to really sort of frame, I suppose, a discussion. What is cyberbullying? How can we understand it to be? Because of course it is an evolving concept, involving practices as digital technologies advance.
Okay, so if you go through the definitions, you can of course study the definitions given in the dictionaries. So I think we have given here, taken from one definition taken from one dictionary, but you can, in any dictionary, the definitions, different definitions are there. But the common thing, what's the common, I think in the chat also we got a lot of ideas about what is cyberbullying. So it can be any form. It can be any form of online harassments, any form of online harassments that are willfully done to harm others. Online comments or pictures, or it can be anything, but the idea is with the purpose of harming others, or attacking others, or making others distressed, or so that sort of that mentality. So this the bullying, the word bullying is, I think it's there. You're trying to harm somebody else. So why they are doing it, that's a different thing. There may be different reasons for such people to bully others, but what happens is, ultimately what happens in this process is somebody is either threatened, or embarrassed, or harmed, verbally attacked. So all those things are done, but often in an anonymous way, or using, in online, most of people online don't use their real name. Young people especially, I have heard, they are not, I mean, we, of course, the older generation, we will use our own name. So but most of these young people, they don't, they use pseudonyms. So, you know, you really don't know who is attacking you. So it's really anonymous. So that's this mean-spirited messages willfully trying to harm others, posting to posting anonymously uh, to either threaten somebody or to demean somebody or to psychologically harm somebody else.
Mm. Yes, so intention, it counts for a lot. And I suppose we can think a little bit more about this as we come to some of the responses of the girls, and how intention can often be misunderstood or mistranslated. And there's one question sort of picking up about how do we avoid bullying others, and that's a very wide-ranging question, but I suppose that comes on comes to the point about thinking about our language and our choice of language, which perhaps we can expand a little bit more. But before we dive in to the actual case study itself, some different forms of cyberbullying, Shironica, as you were saying, that, you know, it comes in lots of different forms, but broadly we're understanding it as something that is motivated by ill intentions, and the message is really sort of attacking somebody else. Now, as we've already explored in some of the content in the Digital Literacy Lab, there's a whole new vocabulary that is coming up with digital technologies, and it's a very fast evolving landscape and new phenomena coming forward all the way. So something that was really commented on the forums that I was noticing is this idea that it's fast evolving and that it can feel quite overwhelming, sort of keeping up to date with all these different forms. Here, we'd really invite you to share what are some of the forms, what are some of the forms perhaps of ill-intentioned interaction online. Here we picked one, this idea of doxing, which has actually been around for a few decades now, supposed to have grown out of hackers culture, this idea of sharing a document or information about someone who wanted to stay anonymous. And this, of course, is coming into this whole realm where we see cyberbullying overlapping with privacy and how we protect our information online. So I wonder, well, invite you to, at this point, everyone who's joined us, to share if there's any other forms that you know of. Let me come to the chat.
Yeah, some words like, now there's this trolling. Somebody has tagged here. And there may be other words which are, I mean, cyberbullying is if you consider that as an overall thing, that there are certain specific terminology. If you can think about such terms, you can type in the chat box.
Emma, Shironica, sorry to interject. I've collated some questions that I might want to pose to at the right moment based on aggregate responses. So shall I pose any, cue me when I should perhaps pose these to each of you?
Thanks, Kirk. That's super. And perhaps we can answer some of those now as people are thinking about sharing some of the vocabulary and their knowledge. So please, yeah, Kirk, please go ahead. Thank you.
All right. Hello again, everyone. I'm the fellow that's chatting with you along with Dr. Alex Grech to pose questions and respond as best we can. So there's a few different questions. I think the first one that I might pose to you is, cyberbullying is pervasive because there are rarely any consequences. Who is responsible for policing behavior on these platforms? So this is kind of a regulation question, and I've been trying to counter that with, you know, the role of education. Because bullying is not going to go away as much as I mean, of course, we hope it to be minimized, but the reality is I think that bullying is here to stay in some shape or form. So I guess the question is, should we focus more on the regulation side, or should we more focus on the education side, or is there a sweet spot in between?
Shironica, what do you think? Over to you first.
Maybe you can go ahead and
okay, sure. It's a really important question, and as you highlight, Kirk, there's that I think that Yes, the answers are this, your question of the sweet spot, because there isn't going to be one magic silver bullet, as a lot of the commentary talks about. We have these three ideas in the mix of content moderation, education, regulation, and it's something that I've written about recently in amidst all of these discussions and efforts to regulate platforms. And Kirk, as you mentioned in the chat, this idea that we're going to fully regulate and control platforms isn't going to come to fruition. We're not going to reach a point where we fully regulate. And indeed, do we want to reach a point when we're fully regulating? Because what's the difference between regulating and moderating and censorship? So we end up with this spectrum where we have to be balancing this idea of freedom of expression and freedom of speech versus managing content that could be incendiary or incite violence, for example, which was a really important point I noticed being posted in the forum about Zambia posting or creating rather laws to regulate this. So really, the position I'm at the moment is, of course, regulation. We do need some regulation. We can't have it as a Wild West. Content moderation, of course, is really important. There's all sorts of examples we could talk about. There was the napalm incidents from Vietnam context, which highlighted the challenges of having automated content moderation. But I think actually we're all here because we all believe that education is the root. It's not the only solution, but it sits at the heart of this, because we can't possibly moderate all content. But if we know what questions to ask of content, and we understand some of the social phenomena that are coming about, so cyberbullying as a broad category, doxing as an example, and understand the impact of what we do online to people and their everyday lives offline, then I think we get a little bit closer. Shironica, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you elaborated it well, because we really can't stop totally. Nobody can stop. This will be there always, right? So that's the importance of being aware or being educated. This whole concept of digital literacy comes there. How to use the digital platforms in a more how would say safely, as well as more meaningful manner. Now we need to use the digital platforms. Some people just stop using the platforms, but I don't think that's an answer, because we, especially at this time, we need to use the platforms. So it's not stopping, but then how to balance I think in the course you're talking about this consumption of information, digital consumption and digital creation. So all those concepts need to be educated from the very young age, because now from the very young children, they are exposed to all these things. So from the very young ages, these concepts have to be taught, and parents also need to be educated as well. Sometimes parents are unaware about, sometimes children know better than parents because they are quick to get at things. So educating, yes, I think our responsibility is there to educate both children and parents, as well as teachers, to take leadership in playing a big role here.
Absolutely. And without further ado, if we may pause on questions to skip ahead to the case study, I think this is where this was really the impetus behind taking a case study, was to think about tangible ways in which we can really teach these issues that people have been sharing in the chat about all the ways in which cyberbullying might be facilitated, made easier online, and can come about, ways in which people might, there's ideas of taking screenshots, creating fake profiles, impersonating. There's so many different forms. So it all sounds a little bit troubling and really unmanageable, but we've got an interesting case study. So Shironica, over to you for, if I may, for a summary of this instance that you were highlighting in the case study that we've released as part of the content and that we'd like to discuss for the remainder of our time today.
Yes. So I hope many of the participants would have watched the video already. You posted earlier. I believe most of them would have watched, but then I would quickly summarize because the details were there. But this story is about two young women in their 20s. They cosplayed, you know, this cosplaying. That was a new incident in Sri Lanka, actually, you know, dressing up costumes which they like to their models, like, you know, that cosplaying thing, that event was there in 2017. And these two young women, they dressed up as Wonder Woman because that was their idol, or they liked the Wonder Woman character, and they dressed up. They took. I mean, they were very excited about it, and they posted the picture online. That's for their friends to see, and so that they were maybe proud of themselves to creating such a costume. But then what happened was, unfortunately, people start attacking them for after posting this picture online. They got massive attacks, insulting remarks throughout the Facebook pages, giving very demeaning comments of their bodies, the body shaming. And these two girls were shocked because they didn't expect that sort of comments from the online community. They were very distressed and very depressed and distressed of this whole thing. So what happened was the same online community, I think if we go to the, that's the story, what happened, then while they were very upset about, they actually even didn't know that this was happening, but there was this online community, another online community who came up to support them. Now that's the importance here. In the same online community, now this is the online community, they are in this digital world, and they posted the picture with, you know, with maybe some pride that they have dressed up well as Wonder Woman and all. But then see their comments, they were shocked why they were spending their time hating us, why are they telling us all these comments. They were so depressed. But then what happened was, within the online community, a supportive group was created. A supportive group started posting comments to support them to be strong, not to get distressed by these comments. And they posted comments supporting the two girls, and then it went viral. The whole thing turned the other side. The bullies were attacked by the online community itself. So it actually reached even Hollywood, because they tweeted that this about this this happened in the Facebook, and most of these comments were like in our local language, it seems. I read some more reports, so it was in Sinhala. So then sometimes internationally the you know, the restrictions are also not applicable sometimes because of the language. Maybe people can't understand because only in Sri Lanka we are using that language. So that's another thing. Anyway, what happened was, this whole thing turned the other side round when the one tweet went viral, and the two the key people, like the person who played the Wonder Woman character and the director of the film, those two posted tweets in support of the two girls. Then that went international. That whole news was international. Everywhere those reports, if you search, you will see most of the international reports, these things were reported, and the community was starting this discussion about cyberbullying and how these things should be stopped. It created a lot of discussion among the community, and the two girls became strong, and they took this experience to share with the world, to make the others strong through their story. They took this initiative to share their story as a support for others who will face the same situation. So that's in summary what happened. Uh, Maybe you might like to add something, Emma?
Sure. No, it's such a heartening story, isn't it, amongst so many instances where we see attacks online. And I think what this really highlights, number one, the sort of flattening of a hierarchy, which is, you know, in a normal instance, getting access to the film director Patty Jenkins of Wonder Woman in the US and crossing so many geographical boundaries and different contexts might be quite challenging. So that's one of the you know, I suppose the wonders, shall we say, of our communication technologies today. And I think there's, you know, the huge maturity and critical thought of the girls, Shironica, that in the two quotes that you highlighted, this idea of calling out those who are ill using these technologies, and you know, the lack of support, because it can be an amazing forum for gathering support for causes and understanding. And I think the other point, Shironica, if I may to pick up, is this idea that of course we've got English language content, but that's another element when we're talking about, of course, other languages, indeed, many other languages that social media is mediated in, and English is, you know, of course, not the only one. So that's the question of access to content and how to moderate this, and the focus of platforms as well, coming back to that overarching question that we've been posed about moderation, regulation, and education, and where responsibilities lie. And the responses, Shironica, you were saying that there was where were these posted? These responses of the girls.
The girls, yeah, the two girls, because they were interviewed. You know, all this. Once this went viral, the newspapers, even international newspapers, they were interviewing the girls because they wanted to share their story online. So in the interviews, these were the things they have been, these are the quotes. These are the quotes of the two girls said, because they, even though they were very shocked and distressed at the beginning, but this outpouring support of the online community, they felt, they said it was amazing. See, even people I don't know personally, they were messaging, asking me to stay strong. It was amazing. So that support, that mental support helped them not to become so affected by this. And see, not only from Sri Lanka, but all over the world, a beautiful outpour of love. There were 100 supporters. Every single troll or hater, there were 100 supporters showering me with love and support. So you see the words of these girls shows how much they got this support from the online community. I think that's the beauty of it. That's the positive part of this story. The online community itself coming to support uh, these girls.
And I suppose this brings us to the question that we've got hanging from one of the participants who've taken the time to join us today, is this idea, okay, we've got this case study, this is what happened, we understand the context, which we took some time in the first half of our session to really outline. We thought about frameworks and definitions and shared experiences. The question is, what next, right? It's what do we do about, we've got this instance, and what do we do about it? And I think, as you've highlighted, Shironica, that this, well, really it came from the girls themselves, that they highlighted that this is a public story and is an opportunity for us to learn and pick apart, take our learning points from this. And indeed, and that's really our point, I suppose, that to cover in the last minutes that we've got with you today. And of course, this is a discussion that we hope will continue in the forum, is given this scenario, what can we learn about it and how can we learn about it? So Shironica, perhaps over to you for some points on that, given Amaya's thoughts and her view of how her story had played out and what role her story had for others.
Yeah, so I think the quote itself says, because they wanted to make it a public story, because so that everybody got to know about it. Usually when such things happen, people don't want to go public, you're shy, you're embarrassed, you don't want to talk about it, but you suffer inside without telling others. But then only you become depressed. Depression can happen. So I think this is a very strong way of showing or responding, not showing, the responding to these attacks, because then it's according to this girl's words, it's not just another case of cyberbullying. It's not just another case of cyberbullying. Now everybody knows, and it has opened up a conversation. So this conversation is important. I think that's what we also would like to start, this conversation. That's why we used this case study. We took this case study to pose it as a scenario to start a conversation among the learners in the MOOC. So that's why, based on this, we are posing certain focus questions to start that dialogue among our MOOC learners.
Lovely. No, absolutely. And here, to come to our the questions themselves that we've posed in the forum, I would encourage you to start sharing and reflecting on post this session today. It really to come back here to one of the opening pieces of content in the first week of the MOOC, which was thinking about the cognitive taxonomy and how do we, given these scenarios, and we've been talking about using them as learning points and asking questions. Well, this is a perfect example, a really useful example to start putting into play. So what have we done here, I think, in this session, and through Shironica's expertise and context, is really embed that sort of knowledge, those early moments, shall we say, of that cognitive taxonomy, as I talked about, the knowing, understanding, having that basis of understanding. And I think what we are coming to now, and we sort of started within that richer context we're outlining at the beginning, is the critiquing. It's asking questions. So yes, we've got 4 questions here that we'd love for you to pick up on and discuss. We have only a few minutes left to us, however, for questions to be posed to us. So perhaps we can, to outline the questions that we're going to leave for you, and please post additional questions you have for us that we might address before we part ways to this live session. So the 4 questions we have for you. Number 1, how did the 2 young women navigate through the cyberbullying challenge they faced and subsequently show agency over the issue? And I think we might have a few pointers through Shironica's responses so far. Number 2, focusing on both sides of the online chatter, the criticisms of the young women versus the outpouring of support for them. Coming on to the next question, how does this evidence the power of digital creation and digital consumption, which we're going to explore at much greater length in the next few weeks. And finally, we've started to point towards this idea of how this story could be used as a case study in a discussion with your students on how to use social media. And I suppose the next question, which we've put at the end of the forum topic, is to start thinking about parallels in your geographies or in your context of instances where someone's posted something, there's been an unexpected response, and how people have navigated that, how it's been called out, how it's been managed. And going back to your point, Shironica, just coming offline completely might not be the way that we're looking. to manage this ultimately, because as you've highlighted, there's so many opportunities to cross geographies and to really feel empowered.
Of course, yes. So I think the 4 questions will be posted in the forum so that the dialogue can happen there. And I would love to see the comments. I would love to see the ideas. A lot of ideas here as well in the chat. I think we should get the chat posted somewhere as well, because a lot of very good ideas are there. And the discussion can continue from today, is it? You're going to open, you already opened it, I believe.
Absolutely. So heading to, I've done a shortcut here. You'll see it pinned at the top of the forum, bit.ly/DLLE discussion will take you straight there. We are on the hour now. Of course, these sessions always whiz by far too quickly, but given we're online and with you, please do pose any burning questions that you might have for us before we sign off and continue with our day. So I'm looking at the chat, Kirk. I don't know if there's been anything that's come your way that we might address before we sign off.
Yeah, there's been some people have shared some interesting case studies or examples from their country contexts. But I think we've addressed it, but I'll maybe rephrase. I wouldn't say we fully addressed it, but I think one other question I would come back to is around, it seems like the conversation shift and around focusing on education, maybe moving around regulation and focusing on education. And I think a lot of the generic responses are, yes, we need to educate learners, how to better respond and respond to this kind of cyberbullying, and also navigate and manage their own digital behaviors. But I think ultimately what I want to question is around teacher educators and educators themselves. What skills do they need? And of course, DLL, this course, Digital Literacy Lab for Educators, speaks to this. But I'm curious to know, perhaps from Emma, your experience in your consulting work and other work, or Shironica firsthand at the university, what you're seeing around tools for educators to impart these kinds of ideas, strategies, if you will, to their learners.
That's a really important question. Thank you. Thank you, Kirk, for posing that, because of course we've got to think beyond today and how we manage this. So to my mind, what I've seen, especially in the past year, is a huge raising of public awareness, particularly in the UK, with national broadcasters. The BBC over here have been really looking to raise the public messaging. There's been a number of outfits in the US and within Europe who've been focusing more broadly on different shades of information, but particularly in a news context. So there is definitely a body of organizations and a growing body of resources, spaces where people are looking to give classroom ready resources, encourage discussions and debates in classrooms about these issues. And indeed, that part of the Digital Literacy Lab content, I reimagined it as a set of discussion topics for currently sitting on a Parlay Ideas, a discussion platform that's based over in Canada, and I'll post the link in the chat here. But the short answer is, to my mind, there's just not enough. So this is where really it comes back to the core role of this course is about encouraging all of you who've joined us and empowering you to start these conversations in your regions and geographies, and to take some of the broad learnings, especially that we've started looking at in the course, and start translating them for your context. Shironica has done a superb job of translating some of these ideas for the Sri Lankan context. But certainly, to my mind, we've got a big challenge, especially, to take the UK context, that none of this is in a national curricula. It's not set as learning that has to be conducted in schools. So we do have a challenge if this material stays outside or on the fringes of education. And that comes back to our role as teachers, educators in schools, universities, colleges, consulting in different ways, which is where I sit, or coaching and mentoring in different geographies. That comes back to us. So we need governments to do something policy top down, but really all of us, we need to come sort of bottom up. So there is work happening, but certainly we need to do more, and that's the role of this initiative. Shironica, over to you.
Okay, I think, I think we all, I was just reading the comments in the chat box, and it's very nice to see that I think everybody's aware of these things. It's a global issue. It's not, I mean, I just got a Sri Lankan case study, but I'm sure there are a lot of incidents all over the world. I would like to see some examples from their own context as well. In the discussion, when you're answering, I would like to request the participants if they can share some incidents, similar incidents from their own context. That would also be interesting. And of course, I'm an educator. I'm for 26 years I've been working with teachers. I myself has been a teacher, so I think I fully agree with you. It's the great responsibility we have as teachers, and I've been doing that to my best, especially with the Commonwealth of Learning, the C Delta project, enhancing the digital literacy among teachers and students. Actually, through those projects also, we got to know many of even the teachers didn't know the concepts of digital identity, digital footprints. All those concepts are totally new. They're just using the digital media, not knowing these concepts. So that's the danger. So that's the responsibility we all have to educate not only the children, but teachers and parents as well. So we'll all engage in this mission together. I believe we all can do well to our best possible extent. We can do it.
Thank you, Shironica. And I think that pairs the two elements, doesn't it? It's about providing this information to young people and children directly or through the gatekeepers of educators. That comes to the question of teacher training, which again is another aspect. It's not part of the teacher training, certainly in the UK. And let's hope that that changes in the near future. We're a few minutes past the hour, and of course this is a conversation that we hope will continue in the forum. If I may wrap up at this point and come to a point from Dr. Alex Grech, who teaches on this material, and come back to this constellation of education, regulation and content moderation that we're keeping in the balance here. We as educators hope to keep furthering these ideas and sharing them and pushing for initiatives as part of teacher training, and indeed empowering the children, young people, indeed adults that we engage with and teach to ask questions of the material that they come into contact with, but also ask and require really that this material be part of their education systems. But at the same time, I think we need to keep our eyes on what's happening in terms of regulation, which is a really important element. We can't have unregulated spaces of the internet. We can't have unregulated industries offline. So we certainly don't want lack of regulation online. And of course, there we come to content moderation, which is an ongoing debate and a very well, can be quite a controversial debate depending on the geography. So at this point, I'd like to extend my thanks to Shironica for, first and foremost, for suggesting a very rich case study that we can start to pick apart. We've contextualized it in this session but we've really sort of started to scratch the surface, but we're really hoping that you will all really start to dig deep and ask some of those critical questions of it as you exchange in the forum. Thank you so much to Kirk and Alex for fielding questions and responding in the chat. It's been super to see it so active, and I'm only sorry that I didn't have a second pair of eyes to keep responding, but it's clearly this is an issue that we will need to continue addressing. But I hope that first and foremost through this case study and through the discussion forum, and indeed through the remainder of the Digital Literacy Lab for Educators course content, that you'll find this a really fruitful way to start at taking some of the theory and translating it into practice and embedding it in your lessons and learning and sharing it with your communities. Final comments, this will be recorded and shared. Kirk, is there anything that I'm forgetting to share with those who've kindly joined us?
I just wanted to put a plug in for the next week's online facilitation.
Oh, thank you. Yes, please.
So that's to you because you'll be facilitating that, but that's with Dr. Professor Jane Agbu.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you. Yes, so we'll next be meeting next Wednesday. Details for that will be posted, and we do have this will be pairing with, again, some content that Jane has created from the Nigeria context will be released as well to pair with that. And we're going to be talking about inclusive technologies. So a slightly different example, slightly different focus, but certainly, again, asking questions of what our digital world has come to be and what it could come to be, which is the broad role of the course. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined us. Without further ado,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Shironica. And if there's nothing else I've forgotten to share, then wish you a very good day. Do take the opportunity to come to the forum and look forward to reading your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining.